This is ComD 400, Hearing Science. This is a lecture on the functions of the outer and the middle ear. Part 1 will deal with functions of the outer ear, and we'll cover slides 1 through 29. Part 2 then will be the rest of the slide set 30 through 49. The outer ear is functional and has some specific functions, but as we'll see in a second, can be decorative as well. And just as a reminder, the outer ear is both the pinna and the external ear canal. Some of the functions, and therefore the benefits to people of the outer ear are going to depend on whether it's attributable to the pinna or the external ear canal, and we'll walk through those as we get to it. And again, just a reminder, here's this classic, what you've seen several times already, of this cross section through the this frontal section through the auditory system, showing us the this peripheral auditory system. And again, here we have the pinna there and the external ear canal there, and so that's what we're going to be considering for the rest of this lecture set. First, some of the decorative aspects of it. Now, maybe you didn't know it, maybe you did, but some of that anatomy of the pinna that you learned a lecture or two ago, you know that there are some corresponding jewelry pieces here. In fact, there's you could Google, as I came to find, tragus jewelry, and you'll find stuff that goes in there. In fact, look at this antitragus here. This part we had called the concha, and so they call this little thing here the conch. This area here, we talked about the helix, and so again, those in the jewelry business have these things exactly aligned with the anatomy terms that you learned already for this class. Not just that, so we have standard helix piercing. You can also go, one of the big vendors of this is Etsy. You go to Etsy, they've got all kinds of stuff. Multiple helix piercings, and what I like, the industrial helix piercing, which is this, but they're failing to comment on this very significant earlobe piece. And the reason I mention that is because the pinna can be not just functional, but can also be decorative. And so if you're thinking about you needed a place for your cell phone, there it is. There you go. We talk about the now we talk about the functions of the outer ear. This is just a quick summary slide. The details are going to follow over the next whatever 10-15 slides. But briefly, the outer ear has the following basic functions. It collects sound wave. That's a property of the pinna. It's going to amplify specific frequencies by a process we call resonance. All of the functions of the outer ear we can consider to be passive. There's really nothing active going on. It just simply is attributes of the tissue and their positioning and things like that. And when we'll talk more about this resonance characteristic, essentially what we're talking about is amplification. Energy is added by resonance to specific selective frequencies. So that's the second one. And the third one is there are a couple of protective aspects with this, both from large invaders, critters that might be in your ear, as well as microorganisms, bacteria, and so on. These latter two functions, the function of resonance is an ear canal function. Largely the aspects of protection are also ear canal, having to do with either the very acute sensitivity of the ear canal or cerumen, which is produced in the ear canal. As we walk through again and look at figure 9.1 from Cycle, what we can think about of it, here's the pinna, and the pinna is basically this sound collector. So that's going to be that very first function there. The second function of resonance is going to happen in the ear canal, and that's the second one there. And then the protection has to do with the shape of the ear canal and with the cerumen that's produced here as well. So that would be then the third characteristic there. I realize that in order for you to have a better understanding of this concept of frequency and resonance. I just wanted to throw this up for you just to kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about when we talk about test frequency, because this is going to be kind of an important concept for us here. Let me see if I can move this out of the way. I cannot. And so when we think about in testing, that's a piano keyboard there. It's just assumption, as you know that, is that on the piano we've got several notes. On the audiometer we've got several frequencies that we test. And I'm sort of showing you roughly, and I think this might have gotten misaligned just a little bit, where these approximate test tones are. Point being is that somewhere around the highest key of the piano, somewhere around here, is about the frequency of 4,000 hertz. So we would say that as 4,000, and then capital H, small z, for the electrical engineer, Heinrich Hertz. Hertz, who's German, but that's why we call it that. And this is the scientific notation for frequency. And so to give you a sense then, mostly the sounds that we deal with in audiometry, and in fact the sounds that we deal with in terms of most of the sounds of speech, are in this range, and then would go on up to maybe about 6,000 hertz, which is about the range of most common speech sounds. So let's just give you a basic idea of the tonality of the sounds that we're going to be talking about in just a moment. The first aspect of the functions is the pinna as the outer ear, specifically the pinna as a sound collector. And so what you want to think about is that the pinna collects sound waves. It does it passively. It's immobile. Pinnas don't move. When I think about, if you want to, think about the pinna as a funnel. I don't know if I spelled that right. Let me spell it again. Let me take it off screen. Funnel, F-U-N-N-E-L. And think about it as that here's the pinna, and then it goes down to the ear canal and finally gets to the tympanic membrane. So that's what we think about when we think about what it's doing, is the sound waves are gathered by this relatively large area of the pinna and the concha, opening to the ear canal and then sent down the ear canal. So this would be pinna here, this would be ear canal there, and this would be TM down there. The irregularities in the shape of the pinna, the little divots and dimples and scout and the fossa and all that kind of stuff, provide slight but measurable selective emphases for what we would consider, in our terms, for relatively high frequencies, for the sorts of frequencies that we're able to hear. Here are some classic Pinna Extenders from World War I. These were spotters for airplanes, and so they needed to hear better. So this is basically ideas to be able to capture more sound waves. So that's the idea there. And of course, and here's even a bigger version of these Pinna Extenders for aircraft detection. So here's the guy down here. I don't know if you saw, there's the guy down there with these big tubes going to his ears, each propelling, capturing sound and hoping to hear incoming aircraft. You could make this somewhat more miniaturized, and from antiquity through, well, really the early part of the 20th century, this concept was involved in something called ear trumpets. So I don't have a date here on this particular piece that I came up with, but here's a person with a, here's the trumpet part here, and then there's a tube that he would hold up to his ear into there. Here's one that's somewhat more discreet, where the, see, even back then people were not wanting to display that they had hearing loss. Here's one, so he's got one, his little thing is down in there, and then it goes up to his ear. And here's one that's very, very nondescript, very hidden, where it's built into his cane, into his walking stick. So here's the thing that picks up sound, is a little tube, and then sends it into his ear there. So, very, very subtle kinds of approaches. That was then. Ear trumpets now, there's actually a product kind of still on the market. See, where's the name for this thing? But it's called ear glasses. I actually have a set of these. And ear glasses are these little plastic things that hang over the ear. You can kind of see the other one over there as well. And what they do, and you can kind of see it here, this was an older version where they had it on a headband. The new version of ear glasses, these things just kind of hang over your ear. But the fundamental premise is the same, is that they just basically extend the size of the pinna, and they just sort of capture more sound. So those of you who may be in and around campus at some point, stop by to see the ear glasses that I have. All right, moving on then to the second function. The second function of the outer ear is selective frequency amplification. Painfully, I have to go through some facts of physics of sound, acoustics of sound, that kind of acoustics of speech and hearing. So a couple of quick facts here. Fact number one. All air-filled cavities, and the external ear canal is one example, have a particular frequency at which they vibrate best. There's several names for this, one of which would be a natural frequency, but the one that's probably more commonly used would be its resonant frequency. And so again, all cavities have all air-filled cavities have a resonant frequency. The determinant of the specific frequency, whatever the frequency is, happens to be cavity size. There are other factors too. The cross-sectional diameter is another one, but primarily we can just think of this as the cavity size. And as it turns out, the resonant frequency is inversely related to cavity size. So as cavity size, and so that particular concept, as cavity size goes up, the resonant frequency goes down. So the larger the cavity of the EAC, the lower the frequency of resonance. Everybody got that? And again, the higher, the smaller the cavity, the higher the frequency of resonance. It's just a very basic principle in sort of how cavities and even how musical instruments operate, for that matter. And so again, we could kind of think about it that the ear canal is really no exception. It's a cavity that has a natural resonant frequency that's determined, that the actual frequency is determined by the cavity size. So if that's the case, then you expect that there's going to be age and gender effects. That is to say, for children up through the age of maybe adolescence, their external ear canal is getting progressively bigger, and as it gets bigger, the resonant frequency gets slightly lower in frequency. Then there's a slight gender effect as well. If the premise is that male ear canals are larger than female ear canals, then you would expect there would be female resonant frequencies would be a little bit higher than males. The typical adult ear canal resonance is shown in the next figure out of Cycle. This actually is not a Cycle publication. I mean, it's in the Cycle book, but this is a chart that was in a book that I had from the 1970s as well. And so the ear canal resonance is this particular one. So let's look at what's going on here. Essentially, the way that we would get that particular curve, if you look down here, what frequency it's at, they're showing it at somewhere around probably, we'll say 3,000 hertz. This is frequency in kilohertz, so this would be 3 kilohertz to be consistent with the numbers there. What they're basically saying here is that they're showing this in units of gain, which means what's the difference between the input signal versus the output signal. So in this case, if the way that we would measure this would be we would put a signal at the entrance to the ear canal, we'd put a microphone by the tympanic membrane, and as we put, let's just say average, let's say we put 70 decibels, a unit of amplitude, across all of these frequencies, and then just measure what we're getting at the microphone next to the tympanic membrane, what we would see is that at this particular frequency, at this frequency here, at 500 hertz, we'd get 70. The gain is 0. At 1,000 hertz, we would get maybe just a little bit more, maybe what is this, like 72 or something like that. In and around 3,000 hertz, look what we get. We get somewhere around, in this particular view, somewhere around maybe 12 decibels more. So we'd actually be recording down here 70 plus the 12 dB of resonance. So we'd actually be measuring 82 decibels of sound pressure at that ear canal at the tympanic membrane. Well, where did this, where did this amount of difference, gain is another way of saying difference, where did that come from? It came from the resonance of the ear canal. That's where it came from. So again, it's just physically, it's a property of the physics of the canal, essentially. It's just a natural occurring phenomenon. So the resonance of the ear canal adds approximately 10 to 15 decibels to the input signal, but only at the resonant, at the region of the resonant frequency. So what's important to note about it, and again, why do we even care about it? First of all, every individual has a unique resonant frequency. Now, there's going to be a lot of commonality, but essentially what this does, each person's individual resonant frequency adds a specific acoustic character to the incoming signal. So to some extent then, and I could argue, we all hear the world slightly differently because our resonant frequencies are all slightly different. The resonant frequency is a filter of sorts of some sounds are given a little bit more prominence to some people and others to others. So, so it is that. It is individual, and so in that sense, it's something that is unique to the person. Here's something, though, that's really important. It's also measurable. And where it's measurable and where it's important is as part of the highest standard of care in fitting hearing aids. So in hearing aid work, we would do a process called a hearing aid verification called real ear measurement, or REM, using a microphone that we stick down the ear canal toward and right toward the tympanic membrane. So this is, a very important part of high-level quality care provision of hearing aids, and really what sort of should separate out audiologists from non-audiologist dispensers. In REM jargon, the ear canal resonant frequency is also is more known as the REUR, real ear unaided response. So on this particular curve down here, again, this is a gain curve, so we don't know what the input signal was. It doesn't matter. What I'm doing here in blue is showing you this is that individual's ear canal resonance. And where was this? So again, the ear canal resonance for this particular individual is somewhere around 3,000 hertz. It doesn't show it. I don't see it there anywhere. We then put a hearing aid in the person's ear, and the hearing aid, there's actually was two different settings here. And so with the hearing aid in the ear, we got this much output. Now, if we took, let's just call this, if we did the top curve, the REAR minus the REUR, that gives me the gain that I measured in the hearing aid, the difference between these two. That gain is just simply a difference value. And so essentially what we're showing you here then is that here's the curve for the one that I showed you. And what's nice is that, and let me just change my pen color here just to kind of give you the idea here, that this other curve here that I put in red, that's what we're calling the target value. So we put a target value in to the system based on the person's audiogram and based on what our prescriptive goal is with the hearing aid, and then match, essentially look at the relationship between what we actually measured versus the target. For this second fitting here I'm showing you in blue, that's a very good match to target. Basically, if the person increased the volume, you'd get up to that red line very easily. Now, here's this particular example. I'm going to just go to a different color here. I'm going to go to green to show you this other fitting here that's kind of in here. And the green is this one there. And what you're seeing is that there's a very poor match to target, because in this particular case, the green fitting did not adequately take into consideration the real ear unaided response. In other words, did not correctly fit it based on the knowledge of the ear canal resonance. And that's what they're trying to show you here, is that this is poor. This is a gap that shouldn't be. And again, what they're showing you is that, well, yes, properly fit, by seeing the information here, you could go from a very poor fitting to a much better fitting, and that's what the intent of that is. Just to show you, here's where that REU, where the microphone would go. The microphone would go into the ear canal, and it would terminate somewhere around there, right near the tympanic membrane. So here's the TM. And you do that once unaided, you get your REUR, and then you do it aided. Simply you basically just leave the microphone where it was. So the microphone is where it was. And you put a hearing aid over it, and so we're still measuring. And so again, the computer is going to take the difference between this value, compare it to this value, and you're going to get your gain score. But that's where the microphone is placed. So this ear canal is an important location for audiologists and hearing aid fitting. I don't have the capacity at the moment to explain this to you, but this is sort of a high level, showing you what contemporary data are with a contemporary piece of equipment called audio scan. That's basically showing you here, what good hearing aid fitting and good hearing aid data look like. In COMD 420, you'll get more exposure to this basic information. And depending on when you're viewing this, it might be COMD 4200, just saying, in semesters. Finally, relative to the outer ear, we're dealing with now the third and the final function, which is protection. Most of these are aspects of the external ear canal. And so we have protection from essentially trauma, from things that might be intruding on the ear canal, as well as protection from bacteria. The protections that are afforded by the ear canal relative to intruders and invaders come from basically two things. Number one, the double-bended curve shaped of the ear canal, and two, the multiple nerve sensory innervation to the pinna and external ear canal. Mostly we're talking about external ear canal, which provides us with exceptional tactile sensitivity. The other aspect of protection is due to cerumen, which was discussed in an earlier lecture. Here's a quick look at the ear canal curvature. Now, what this is actually a picture of is a picture of an ear impression. So in clinical audiology, we would take a plastic cast of the ear. Now, just to give you an orientation here, this would be posterior to this side. This would be anterior over here. This would be lateral, and then this would be medial. So you have the general orientation. It's kind of flipped on its side, so it's not the way that it would be, if I was to pull this out of your ear. So it's like parallel to the floor, which is kind of an odd way of showing it. But here's what I want to show you: the double bend. This area here is the concha. So that's the bowl of the ear. The tragus would be right about here, just if you're looking for a landmark. The tragus would be sort of out here someplace. All right, so what do we have here in terms of curvature? We have, it's going straight into the canal there. Here's our first bend this way, as it bends posteriorly, and then it bends again and heads medially again. So when I talk about a double bend, there's one there and there's one there. Again, if something was to go straight into the ear canal, it would run into the anterior wall. And so again, we have this double bending here. And again, this is an excellent example of an ear mold impression where we have to get both bends in order to have a deeply fitted ear canal. So we say sometimes that the ear canal has an S bend to it. There's one reason to kind of contemplate why that's the case. The last aspect to our protection here has to do with the sensory innervation. Now, this is an update of material that we had at the end of the temporal bone lecture. But again, just to quickly remind you of this, that there are 4 cranial nerves, 5, 7, 9, and 10, that have sensory nerve endings for tactile sensation all scattered throughout. So you can kind of see what is where in terms of the different parts of this. And also, not only these 4 cranial, these are cranial nerves, but there's also one cervical spinal nerve, C2, and a branch of it that also takes up half of the pinna and the skin over the mastoid process. So what this is all telling us is that where we have sensitive ear canals, we have exquisitely sensitive ear canals, and you have multiple nerves that are participating in this. And so that means that we could detect almost anything kind of crawling in our ears. And so that's really a good thing to kind of keep, again, critters out. But the flip side of this is that if there's ever any swelling or pathology in the ear canal, it's excruciatingly painful. In fact, there is a particular name for the pain of the ear called otalgia. And I've been fortunate never to have a circumstance where I had this, but I've heard plenty of children screaming with otalgia, pain in their ears and so on, and it's an intense kind of pain, so you really want to avoid that if you can. This last little figure is just kind of showing you the map of cranial nerve 5 with these 3 different colors, showing you the sensation that's appropriate. And again, for us, we're really talking about the mandibular branch, so we're talking about this part of the pinna, the front wall of the ear canal. And again, here's showing you the C2 there, showing you that whole part of the sensation picked up by that cranial nerve. The spinal nerve, rather, and that cranial nerve. Okay, good. This brings us to now the conclusion of part 1. At this point, you should be able to state the 3 functions that the outer ear provides, those being sound collection, resonance, provision of amplification in the middle high frequencies via resonance, and as well protection, mostly due to tactile sensitivity and the inordinately wide range of nerves that provide sensation there, and as well identify then the reasons for these protective functions, which is to say the sensation and as well the cerumen. Okay, with that now we will halt here and then pick up in part 2 and finish the functions of the with the functions of the middle ear.